Mac Power Users, episode 521, Taming Notifications. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks, joined by my pal and yours, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm good, David. I'm in a weird location. I'm borrowing a conference room in my brother's office building because I don't have any power at home. So I brought a bunch of gear and camped out in here. So it's a little strange. So if I sound a little different, I apologize. But life of an adventure this week.
Well, I feel like your room sounds really good. You sent me a picture. There's a bunch of audio foam in there.
Yeah.
And you actually in some ways sound better. So I don't know what to tell you, man.
Oh, no. It's a much bigger room. But yeah, we've treated this room pretty well. He does some recording in here. So
did you just attach the wheels to your Mac Pro and just ride it down the hill to your brother's office?
It's at home in the dark. I'm on my laptop today. So.
All right. Well, I think you sound great. And today we are going to talk about something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, and that is the dreaded notifications. And you may ask, why are we doing a whole show on notifications on the Mac Power Users? Well, the outline, which we started a while ago, the very first quote in the outline is, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking when I wrote that, but I think
intense.
You can kind of get the idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic that no matter what collection of devices you have in your life, we all deal with it. And as in the beginning, the iPhone didn't really even have notifications outside of phone calls and messages. But then we got the App Store and Notification Center, and now we have the watch, and they're just everywhere. And I think a lot of people, including the two of us, feel like it gets out of control really easily. So we want to kind of talk through the ways we can manage them, some of our advice, and kind of walk our way through it.
Yeah, it's a problem, but it's a solvable problem. And today our goal is to help you solve that problem. I remember when the Apple Watch was first released, there was a slew of reviews that were saying, hey, it's a great thing. The only thing I don't like about it is it just keeps tapping my wrist and bugging me. Mm-hmm. And it was making me really angry because these were like tech writers. And the Apple puts the power of these notifications entirely within your control, and that these people wouldn't bother to adjust the notifications to their liking and then complain that that's a bad feature in the watch. I don't know. It was got me riled up a little bit.
Yeah, we'll have a section about the Apple Watch, but I think one thing Apple maybe got wrong at the launch of that was that every notification you had on your phone was on by default on the watch, and that's not what most people want or need. And over time people have figured it out. But yeah, that was a really interesting point during those initial reviews. Now 4 or 5 years ago, that okay, you could dial that back. It doesn't have to be dinging your wrist all the time.
Well, there was a time on the iPhone that apps didn't have the power of notification, and notifications, I think in principle, are a really great idea. As you have this personal technology you carry in your pocket or you strap to your wrist, or even set on your desktop, the idea that you can get important information relayed to you on a timely basis is a very useful feature. And while the theory is great, the practice is terrible because app developers have all of the incentive in the world to want to get in front of your eyeballs. So they're using every excuse in the book to try and throw notifications at you. And as users, we've got to figure it out. Somebody told me once about the email notification you get, it used to be every 5 minutes, but then it's evolved to the point where every time an email lands, you can get a notification, which is way more than every 5 minutes. But the idea was the analogy of, what if someone could stand behind you and tap on your shoulder while you were working? And what if they could do it every 5 minutes? And I've got a whole bit I do on this when I talk about email in front of people, but it's 12 times an hour. And you start doing the math for the days, the weeks, the years. And it's how do you get any work done with that person tapping on your shoulder every 5 minutes? Well, notifications are even worse. But you have to look at the motivation. If somebody just won the National Hot Dog Eating Championship, is that a reason to be tapped on your shoulder? Probably not. But if your daughter just broke her arm, that happened to me once when my daughter actually broke her ankle, and I got a notification. I think I was at a conference or something, and it's like immediately, spring to action, because we've got an injury. And so as a user, you want to be able to make it so those notifications matter to you, and you have to fight the fact that all developers want to send you notifications. And the other problem I think that happens with this, and I think this is kind of a source problem, I know for me and probably for some of our listeners, is that there's this optimism when you install a new application. I have it all the time. I hear about some app and everybody tells me how great it is, and I install it. And Apple makes them ask you for permission for notifications. But that moment of optimism when you install the app, it is very easy to say, yeah, sure, you're going to change my life. You can have the right to notify me. And you do that a couple times, and before you know it, things are out of control. I think one of the key takeaways for the show is you need to change that default. An app needs to earn the right to tap on your shoulder rather than you just granting it to them.
I came across that last week's show where we rounded up all the weather apps. I installed 24 apps on my phone. We didn't even talk about the ones we tried. Yeah. And part of that testing for me is I want to see what the notifications are like. And then we had like a storm front come through, and my phone would not stop going off. It's like every weather app was telling me at slightly different times about a storm that was incoming. And we're going to talk about ways that Apple has given tools to users to manage this. But there are also rules like in the App Store guidelines about what sort of notifications Apple says are allowed and aren't. You're not supposed to use them for purely promotional things within your application. But the reality is Apple really can't enforce that because these notifications come from, thousands of different developers in the App Store. And it's not really feasible for Apple to police that. I wish they would. I wish there was a way they could, but they can't. And so it's up to us to go through and really see what matters. Is it important? Maybe the Hot Dog National eating championship, like maybe that is a big deal to you and you want that app to notify you, but chances are you aren't and you don't. And we can talk through how to manage that better.
I mean, and the fact is even Apple violates its own guidelines because we get promotional notifications from Apple all the time. So they are, notifications like weeds. You have to constantly prune them back. And that's the goal today. So we're going to talk about how to do that on the various platforms and, what apps make the cut for us and some other general strategies to get better at this.
Yeah, because, it's so interesting. These devices, were around the 10th anniversary of the iPad. I've been thinking a lot about that, and just take the iPad and the way that it has changed since it's the beginning where it was a pretty simple device, and now it can be your computer and the Mac OS 10. Back in the day didn't have a centralized notification system, and people installed Growl and things like that to sort of wrangle them all in one place, and then it got Notification Center. And as these devices have become more a part of our lives and more complicated, this becomes a bigger and bigger deal. And it's, it kind of sneaks up on you. I really like your analogy of weeds, right? You just don't wake up one day and your garden is full of, plants you don't want. It happens over time. And if we spend a little bit of time sort of as we go, it doesn't have to be a big deal where we're spending 4 hours sitting down with all of our devices to fix all of this. Maybe that's how we start. But if you do the upkeep, this doesn't have to be a big deal to keep it in check.
Yeah, and now, frankly, it's easier than it's ever been to do this.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Boll and Branch, the folks who make the softest organic sheets and luxury bedding. Boll and Branch sent my wife and I a set of the sheets. We have a queen-size bed, and holy moly, like I feel like a prince all of a sudden. It really is amazing how nice these are compared to what we had. And what I like is the attention to detail. So the packaging, the unboxing, all of that is just really top notch because Boll and Branch products are made with uncompromised quality. And that attention to detail is present every step of the way. These are meticulously crafted from pure 100% organic cotton. They're such high quality because of the organic long staple cotton that is used, which actually means that Boll and Branch sheets will get softer over time. They're the only bedding, and this is true, loved by 3 U.S. presidents. Can't say that about the sheets you're using now, I bet. Boll and Branch really are the good guys when it comes to ethical manufacturing. all their factories prioritize workers' empowerment and sustainable income. 100% of their packaging is made from recycled paper, and they're the first manufacturer of linens to be fair trade certified. You really need to give these a try. Shipping is free. You can try them out for 30 nights risk-free. And right now, you can get $50 off your first set of sheets by going to bowlandbranch.com and use the promo code POWERUSERS. Go there, upgrade your bedding. You won't regret it. One final time, Boll and Branch. That's BOLLANDBRANCH. Bowlandbranch.com and use the promo code POWERUSERS to get $50 off your first set. Our thanks to Boll and Branch for their support of Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
Well, they must be really good. I didn't know there was anything 3 U.S. presidents could agree on.
Easy.
Anyway, so notifications. I think for the longest time, and we're going to start, we're going to start with iOS because I think that's where the problem is the biggest for most people. But I think for the longest time, it was almost punitive, the process of managing notifications. So what you had to do is you had to go into the settings app, go to the notifications tab, and then you had to manage all the notifications on a per app basis. That's still true, but it is better now. And that is a recent addition to iOS, making it much more possible for us to prune the weeds.
So, of course, for a long time, iOS apps have had to ask for notifications, right? They've never been able to just send you something. And I think that's like step one, right? When you're setting up an app for the first time, you launch it for the first time, there are a lot of panels that come up, right? Maybe it wants to access your contacts or calendars if it's one of those types of applications, maybe your location. But one of those is notifications. And I am guilty of this where I sort of just tap through those screens without really stopping and considering if it's something that I want. And like that's sort of the first gate we can walk through is, do you want this app to send you notifications at all? But even within an app, a lot of more complex apps will send you different types of notifications. So an example of this is maybe an app that, used to track sports scores, something like maybe the ESPN app or the Score or Yahoo Sports or something like that. A lot of those you can go in and actually say, hey, I want to know, maybe the start of the game and the final score, but I don't need every touchdown to send me a notification. I don't need every change of score to send me a notification. And that way you can kind of get what you really want without being bombarded. That's different for every app. A lot of the weather apps we just spoke about have this too, where you can go in and really fine tune what an app can send you, but it can be a good way to bless an app with notifications, but not let it run away from you at the same time.
Yeah. Like, for instance, I allow Carrot Weather to send me a daily weather forecast. Mm-hmm. And it's just a notification. It is, in notification parlance, it's a banner that comes down from the top of my iPhone and just tells me the high and low for the day. And I found that is an acceptable notification for me. I do like in the morning knowing what the weather's going to be. And if I forget to ask my HomePod, my phone tells me. A bit of automation, as you would say.
Oh yes, that's your thing. So here's kind of the deal with the different types of notifications. So you mentioned that they can come down from the top of the screen. There's actually different types of alerts on iOS. So we have things that come to the lock screen. So your phone is locked or unlocked, but you're not on the home screen. You're just on that lock screen. Those notifications can live there. You can have them delivered into notification center. So when you pull down from the top of the screen, they're visible there. You can get banners, which is what you talked about, where they roll in from the top. You can get badges, the little red, number on the red circle. And then you can have the whole the whole shebang. So you can mix and match these things for what you want. And you can even have sounds if you're the sort of person that leaves your phone off vibrate. I am not. My phone is always on vibrate. You can mix and match these different alert types per application.
Yeah, and they have different, consequences. Like, for instance, a lock screen notification shows up and usually requires you to dismiss it. You're going to have to tap on it to make it go away. There's also a setting where you can set the banners that slide down, like my weather banner with Care Weather is just temporary. It slides down, then it goes away. I don't have to perform any action, but you could also make it where you have to physically tap it to make it go away. And that's something you should think about with these notifications. I mean, what is there, like my child broke her arm? That's a notification I want to be persistent until I see it, and the way I handle that is messages from my wife, right? And so, depending on what the source is and what the type of data is, you need to give some thought whether you want it to be a persistent or a temporary notification.
Do you have any that you keep persistent? I'm trying to think through what I use and looking through my phone. I have all of them basically roll off. I don't have any of them stick around.
Yeah, I don't either. After I make the big story about my wife and my my child, it's set as temporary for messages.
Yeah,
but and it has actually got me in trouble because she'll say, "Hey, did you read my text?" And I'm like, "What?"
Mm-hmm.
If I'm busy doing something. But yeah, I like there's something I could probably improve because you have the ability to set a message. So with messages, for example, we'll go through some of these apps in further detail later, but you can set what types of messages get through, and then you can set them as more permanent.
Mm-hmm.
But so you've got all these settings, and I think the big hang up with this, with the initial implementation, is in order to manage these notifications, you had to go into the notifications app and look at all these buttons for every app that you had notifications turned on for. And for a lot of people, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I think about not only the MPU listeners, but the people who are not MPU listeners, the people who are not super into their phone. They are definitely not going to do that. And it was just a pain in the neck to go in there. And then there are a lot of settings that, we just kind of explained them, but there's a lot of settings people generally didn't understand. So they were hesitant to muck around with it. And I feel like that they really helped that out in iOS 12. So the thing now is when you get a notification, you can judge a notification right on that notification center. And if you swipe over, there is a couple things you can do. You can clear them, you can view the notifications, or you can hit manage. There's a manage button. And from right there, you can go into the settings and make those granular changes we just talked about. You can turn it off. So you can just say, you know what, no more. This app keeps throwing notifications at me. I don't care about hot dog championships. Turn it off. And then they've also got a feature that I think is brilliant called Deliver Quietly. And Deliver Quietly means that future notifications from this app will not pester you. They won't tap you on the shoulder, but they will be in your notification center when you check it, which for a lot of apps is the sweet spot. So it's kind of like the best setting for a lot of apps that are in that medium level of notification. And you just tap that and it's done for you. You don't have to go into settings and fiddle around with it.
Yeah, it's great because you can make that snap judgment sort of in the moment. And honestly, and I don't have any suggestions on how they could do it better. I'm not a UI designer, but the notifications section in iOS is sort of complicated. There's a lot of options, and I think it could be clearer in some areas. But this is really easy because you can just do it from the lock screen. You don't have to go dive into those deeper settings unless you want to. And the Deliver Quietly thing really is nice because it just shows up in Notification Center, so you can pull down and check on things. And I use this for a couple of apps. This is particularly nice on the watch, I think. And it's a really good addition because it gave people the option to manage notifications that may had not even been aware, like you said, that the settings app even had this big section in it.
Yeah, and also, like, once you say Deliver Quietly, I don't really know exactly the source for this. Like for some of my Deliver Quietly notifications, like Amazon, for instance, I had Amazon on Deliver Quietly telling me that it's got a package on the way, but it puts up in the notification center an option for me to turn it off right from notification center without even sliding the app. So they're really trying to help users be more aggressive about getting rid of notifications they don't want anymore.
There's also notification grouping that can make the lock screen or notification center a little bit easier to manage. There's automatic, which means iOS sort of just manages notifications based on the type of alert. So in iMessage, for instance, one thread would be kind of one stack of notifications and others would be separate. You can group that by app. So all your iMessages are in one stack and all your, Amazon ones are in another stack. And then you can just have off, which is kind of the old fashioned way where it's just a river of chronological notifications. I've left this on automatic for everything. I really like the notification grouping because, I've got some apps that send me some notifications that maybe I just want to clear all at once, like carrot weather. If it's going to storm overnight and I don't wake up, I don't want to have to, see all of those. Like, okay, this is all in the past now, and I can clear them all very easily from the group. And this was another thing that just kind of made this a little bit more manageable for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like with iOS 12, they kind of really reined it in a lot. And this is something that's much more manageable now than it ever has been. But to me, one of the best power moves you can do, like you take one thing away from the show, is just open your notification center and just look for something in there that you can kill. Look for a weed you can pull and just swipe right on it, tap manage, and then say turn off all notifications, and it's gone. You didn't have to go into settings. You didn't have to figure out what buttons to push to turn it off. It's taken care of for you. Or if there's something that draws your attention that taps on your shoulder that you didn't want it to, but you still want to see it in Notification Center, all you have to do is swipe over and say manage quietly, or quietly deliver, I believe is the term. And then it's done for you. And taking a moment to go through your notifications like that on a daily basis for a week, already you will have conquered more on notifications than you would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So management on iOS is a lot better, but it's still the underlying problem of massive numbers of notifications is still an issue that exists for everybody, and I think it's something that we need to fight. So, do you want to talk about what makes the cut for us? I mean, what are the apps that we actually let through the gate?
Yeah. Your list is way shorter than mine.
Well, there's more on mine. I just decided I was just going to go over it on air, but it is something that I'm constantly looking at and trying to, get things out.
Yeah.
So let's start with like just the general communications apps, because there's some in here we're in agreement on, the phone app and messages. But on messages, you're letting them through, but you had put the note, some badged only.
Yeah, so I'm in a couple of pretty noisy iMessage threads, mostly with other people I do other podcasts with. I won't name them, Mike and Federico, but I have those group threads muted so I don't get, because in messages itself, you can actually put certain threads or even certain people in Do Not Disturb. And I have mine configured where that thread will still add a badge to iMessage, but I don't get push notifications from it because often they're talking, hours before I wake up because of the time zone differences. I don't want those notifications going off at night. But if I pick up my phone, I see, okay, there's 4 or 5 on the messages badge, then I can go see if it was them or not. And that has been a really nice balance for me to kind of still keep tabs. Like if I pick up my phone and there's 8 or 9 in there, like maybe there's something going on I need to be aware of. But most of the time it's not, and I can just get to it when I get to it. And that is a really great feature in messages. It's on the Mac as well, that you can put whole threads into Do Not Disturb sort of individually.
Yeah, so that's kind of a theme running through my thoughts on notifications is the idea of granularity or even like sub-sorting. In messages, you can do it for individual threads, and that's an addition to iOS. For the longest time, that wasn't something you could do. But you get these big group threads. With me, any holiday, my family inevitably has a group thread with like 10 or 15 of us on. Everybody starts trying to prove how smart they are, and I always turn the notifications off. I can't take it, So we all have those threads that we get involved with, and you can mute those on a per thread basis. If you go to the Mail app, which is another one, if you're going to have mail notifications, for me, like I only have notifications for VIPs, and it's a very small list of people. So I rarely get any notifications related to mail. So it's like a sub kind of sort I can do inside the app before the notifications happen.
That's how I use Mail as well. I get just badges for my inboxes, but then I only get notifications from VIPs. And as we discussed in a previous show, you have been added to the VIP list. So you're in a very small crowd. because I get a lot of email that's not urgent, but there's a handful of people, if they do email me, I need to see that. It's something that I need to deal with. And the way our business works, we have some timely stuff like that. So I've been able to use Mail VIP to manage that. Now, that's different on my Mac, but on my iPhone and iPad, at least that's how I have it set up.
Yeah. So for me, I don't have any badges on Mail. I don't, in fact, Mail is an app inside a folder for me, so I don't even really see it. But but VIP messages get a notification, and like you, it's very few people, and the occasion it happens. But the one thing about the VIPs on Mail I would add is that is a very flexible system. So like I'm in the middle on the day job, the legal job, of closing a big deal. We've been working on it for 6 months, and the other lawyer is now a VIP in my system for the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And once the deal's all done, then I'll un-VIP him. So, think about that when you're setting up these notifications to make it work better for you. And then one last example I would give of granular sub notification system is the Activity app. I have a bunch of friends on Activity. I try to fill my rings every day. I've got a bunch of friends that do that too. Steven's one of them, but and making friends in Activity is really part of the fun of it all, seeing how everybody else is doing. But I don't need to know every time Steven makes a bike ride.
Right.
Because but you can go in the Activity app itself and you can mute specific people. And I just mute everybody, and except I unmute, like if I'm in a challenge with somebody, if I'm battling somebody for workouts, then I'll unmute them and I'll see their stuff come through on my notifications. But that's another example of the ability to further add granularity to your notifications, not necessarily through the notifications app.
Yeah, a lot of the Activity stuff is sort of siloed away, and we'll talk about the Apple Watch and the Watch app where you manage a lot of that. But that is a nice feature and one that can really, again, you can surface the people you really want to hear from and sort of leave everybody else in a different level.
And then I have another category of apps that I allow notifications on that are very low signal apps. And I would, like, for instance, every airline app that I've installed on my phone has notifications turned on. Yep. Because when I do need them, they give me notifications about gate changes and tickets and everything like that. But when I'm not about to take a flight, they never send me any notifications. If American Airlines started using its notification system to send me advertisements, I would turn it off. But thankfully, knock on wood, none of them have tried to do that to me so far.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Travel apps definitely make the cut for me. Sort of in talking about communications, I have Slack send me direct messages only, or if my name is mentioned in a couple of threads. And Slack, you can control that. It's very granular. You can set it per like workspace. So I'm signed into a bunch of different Slacks. You can control it at that level. You can control it at the thread level. So, hey, if my name gets mentioned here, let me know, but somewhere else I don't care about when I'm on my phone. That takes a lot of time to get right if you're in a really busy Slack with a lot of people. But again, it can be useful to sort of whittle down what you need. And then GroupMe, which is another sort of group text message cross-platform deal. I'm in a couple groups there. There's some other non-work things I do, and those, they're not noisy. I want to know about if somebody says something, so I allow that to send me notifications as well.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And I guess that's one more example of apps where you have to do additional work somewhere else to make notifications work for you. But, put the work in. It's absolutely worth it, because the end goal of this whole process is when you get a notification, it's going to matter and be relevant to you. And you're not going to get any false positives. You're not going to get tapped on the shoulder for hot dogs.
Right. It's a very specific example you keep coming back to.
I don't know. It just seemed like it was funny when I wrote it down. Now I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah.
Did you watch Silicon Valley?
No, I have never seen it.
There's a whole thing in there about a hot dog app.
Is there? What about some non-communication apps? What about things like to-do lists or media apps?
I am, by and large, those are all turned off. I have badges turned on in OmniFocus for things that get due or nearly do. But I don't really have, like, I don't have it play sounds for me. I'm in that app every day, so I don't need it to give me notifications. I have, time allotted to work on that data. So I don't give it the general notification powers. Media apps, like telling me I'm going, there's a new version of The Mandalorian available. Well, I watch so little media that I know when they come out, I can watch them.
Right.
A good example where people often turn it on is podcast apps.
Yes.
Same thing. I don't turn any of that stuff on for podcast apps because why bother? I mean, when I want to listen to a podcast, I've got it all very, Overcast allows you to very, customize what you see. So when I go in the app, I can see what I want. I've got them in categories and yada, yada. So I don't need that to be a notification either. So I guess in general, the answer is no.
Yeah, I have Overcast tell me, but a lot of that is because I run a podcast company. And if all of a sudden we have shows not showing up in Overcast, I have a problem. I don't have any media stuff. So, no Apple TV Plus or Disney Plus or anything like that. I'm the same way as you. I don't watch a lot. I generally know when something is going to come out, or when I have time, I'll just pick up the Apple TV remote and see what I've fallen behind on. So I don't have anything like that anywhere, not just iOS, but I just don't have a need for that. I do let Todoist send me notifications as things become due. And then we've talked about the Due app, DUE. That is one that its whole thing is recurring notifications. I use it for a handful of things a week, and its whole job is to send you notifications until you take that medicine after lunch. And so I let it do its thing, full blast, everything open.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if you're going to run Due, you should. I mean, that's the whole point of the application. Something we haven't talked about is calendar apps. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a fan of Fantastical. I think they've got a really great thing going. So I use that app and I have notifications turned on for it. I do not have notifications turned on for the calendar app because I don't want 2 notifications for every event.
Right. And that is an issue you run into with if you're using a third-party app that replicates first-party functionality. So if you had the Mail app and the Gmail app installed, you should turn notifications off for one of them. You don't need 2 apps telling you that you have a new email about a sale at the corner store.
And for me, calendars are a particular area where notifications are very useful. I have a tendency when I start working to get lost in it, and I lose track of time and space and all that. And just last week, I missed a phone conference because I was working, and I knew the phone conference was at 3:00. And I was working. I started working at like 1:30, and then it was 4:00, and I didn't get that notification saying, "Hey, it's time to prepare for that call." Mm-hmm. And I almost always get it, but something went wrong, and I had to call and apologize. And I looked like a flake, but it was just because the notification didn't work. So as much as I say you don't want notifications, the whole idea is to get the right notifications. In that case, I kind of blew it. So calendar apps, I think, are a very ripe area for using notifications. One of the nice ways you can kind of automate that with Fantastical is when you create the event, you can just put alarm with a digit next to it. You can put 0 if you want it to go off at the time, but like say alarm 10. Or in the calendar apps, you can set a default alarm.
Yes.
And I think that is a great idea. For certain calendars in my system, they always get alarms.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It is absolutely huge for me to get alerted. I usually set things because I work at home, 10 minutes in advance. Hey, you've got a phone call with somebody. You have a recording that's an unusual time. Because I'm the same way. I will get in the zone with something and totally miss something that I told somebody I would do.
Yeah, and there's a power tip on this. Like if you like to prepare for the things, like a lot of times I need to spend time kind of getting ready for important calls. So I will you can just create a separate event to prepare for it if you want to be like that. Or you can set like an alarm 30 minutes in advance. If you do that, however, you should set a second alarm at or very close to the time of the event because it's the same problem. You set yourself the alarm. Now you're preparing for the event, but then you still lose track. At least in my case, I still lose track of time, and then I don't make the call on time because I'm too busy preparing for it that it goes right by. So you can set multiple alarms, and this is a great example of once you have a good notification system of something helping you out.
Kind of rounding mine out just quickly. I just have sort of a collection of oddball apps that I want to know about. So the Roomba app, if our robot vacuum sucks up a bathroom rug, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
I have Pingdom, which has been a sponsor of many shows. They tell me if the Relay website goes down. That's obviously critically important. So I have it send me stuff. And then I mentioned the Score earlier, just a sports tracking app, so I can see how my teams are doing in their various games. And again, I don't have all the notifications on, usually just game beginning, halftime and the final score. And that's about it for me. It feels like a lot, but then if I compare this list to what's actually on my phone, so scrolling through the notification section, you can see it per app. And the vast majority of apps on my phone I have set to off, and that made me feel pretty good about this list.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing you'll note that there are some apps that don't bother you much, like your Roomba app is not going to bother you much unless it's actually an issue. And so, I don't think you should be looking at, I want to kill all my apps, but I think what you want to do is kill the noisemakers, the ones that tap you on the shoulder for no reason. So there's nothing wrong with having a bunch on there. Like I run my billing through an online service for the legal practice, and the notifications are on. If somebody pays me, I get a notification that makes me happy. I got paid, right? So I'll take that. And just looking through mine, it's the same thing. There's some in here. Like I have the screen time notification turned on, which is an Apple thing. I could turn that off really. But right now, I still am kind of in the stage where I like seeing those reports and kind of having that as a little bit of feedback in my life. But then there's some turned on here that I didn't even realize were turned on because they never send notifications. And it's easier for me to kind of give them some slack because they don't bother me.
Yeah, if it's something like Uber or Lyft, right, where you're not doing that every day, you're only doing it maybe when you travel. Like I'm fine leaving those on because they're only going to bother me when I need them. And when I need them, I really want the notification to tell me that my ride is here, right? So I'm willing to give it that access because those apps generally have been well behaved and they're not abusing the system. If an app like that got bad all of a sudden about sending me promotional stuff, like, whatever, do it now and you save $3, like, then I would consider, okay, you don't get access until, I land in San Jose every June, and then I turn you on for the week that I'm out of town.
Yeah. I feel like the battle is really fought in the notification center on the iPhone for notifications. Just pulling down there and seeing what is showing up and what you want to see and what you don't want to see. That's where you need to make the difference.
Mm-hmm. One thing that came up in the forums, particularly about iOS, but I think particularly about the iPhone, is that it's easy to sort of blast through the lock screen. So the iPhone 6S got much faster Touch ID, and I remember having to adjust how I woke up the phone because if I touched the button, then I'd be logged in essentially and miss anything on my lock screen. And Face ID is kind of the same way. Now you have to swipe up to unlock the iPhone 10 and later, but if you sort of pick up your phone while you swipe it, it's all one smooth motion. And I think a lot of people find that easy to do. It's easy to kind of go right through the lock screen, but I've kind of learned to use tap to wake on my phone. So I sort of touch the screen if it's on my desk, not unlock it, not swipe up, but then that gives me a view onto the lock screen. So if you find that frustrating, it's really a matter of sort of changing your habits about how you wake up your device.
Agreed. And that's what got me in trouble with my wife the other day. I just didn't see she had notified me. She had sent me some messages because I wasn't looking at that. But, it's a virtuous cycle. If you start getting your notifications to a stage where you're only seeing stuff you want to see and you don't have to filter through a bunch of junk, then all of a sudden it's easier to look at that screen and use it. The show is brought to you by TextExpander. You can save time typing and boost your productivity with TextExpander. With TextExpander, it's a snippets app. You can type in something like CCELL and it'll automatically type in your cell phone number. So you can make snippets for those things you type repetitively and use them everywhere, like word processors, email and messaging apps, and even online forums. I think a lot of people don't realize text automation on the web is awesome. And TextExpander makes it super easy because not only do you have those custom snippets, you can add power to it. Like you can put a tab key in the snippet itself. And if you're on the online forum and you add the tab key, it can literally tab through the form and fill it in for you with one snippet. You can put fill in and pop-up fields. This is a great thing I use for some of the customer service stuff I do with the field guides. I've got like custom emails I've written for different problems, and I can have it fill in the name of the product, or I can even type in the name of the customer before the email goes out. And they have some real cool features. They have free webinars, including a Power Tips session I'm going to give in February. So if you're interested in that, if you go to the Text Expander website, I don't know if I'll have a link by the time the show publishes, but I'll definitely write it up at Max Sparky. Once I do, I'm going to do a free webinar on Text Expander, how I use it. And they just got a bunch of interesting people coming in to talk about how they use it. So that'd be really useful. You can manage and share snippets with your company. I was talking about the customer support stuff I do. I have an assistant, and I purchased her an assistant account, so we have basically two accounts in our company. And when I update the snippets, they get updated on hers as well. It's really awesome. So you can have the best people writing the text for your company that everybody uses. It's now available for Mac OS, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad. And because you listen to the Mac Power Users, you can get 20% off your first year. So go to textexpander.com/podcast to learn more about Text Expander. It's a powerful app. They were the original sponsor of the Mac Power Users. We're always thankful for that, and check it out. Thanks, Text Expander, for supporting the Mac Power Users. Okay, so we got this thing in our pocket. What about this thing on our wrist?
Yeah, I feel like the Apple Watches can be a little confusing when you get started, because it is not immediately clear unless you really pay attention what happens where. And so Apple has a document about it where it explains what happens, with your watch and your phone. So if your iPhone is unlocked, you'll just get notifications on your iPhone, right? It's unlocked. You're probably looking at it. It doesn't go to your watch. Your watch won't go off if you're using your iPhone and a notification comes in. If your phone is locked or asleep, you'll get notifications on your Apple Watch as long as it's unlocked. So your phone's in your pocket, you're walking down the street, it'll go to your watch. And then some applications are only on the Apple Watch. So apps like Breathe or the Noise app, where it says, hey, you're in a loud environment, you may be damaging your hearing. Those are watch only. They don't ever make it back sort of up, if you will, to the iPhone. So that's kind of the relationship between the two. And if you're new to the Apple Watch, it may take a little while to get used to that. But in practice, what it means is that your watch and your phone shouldn't go off at the same time. They should sort of be one or the other.
Yeah. And it isn't necessarily consistent. Even all the rules you just stated, I feel like sometimes you don't get notifications on your watch when you've got everything turned on for them, and sometimes you do. So it's just not entirely consistent in my experience.
Yeah, agreed. The watch has become very similar to the iPhone in terms of where notifications go. And of course, you don't have badging on the watch because that home screen of apps is not really conducive to that. But you have a notification center. You can deliver quietly so you don't get actually push notifications where it taps you and then wakes up the screen or the screen lights up. You can just have them just go to the notification center, and you get a little red badge at the top of the Apple Watch screen saying, hey, there's something in notification center. This is something that I wish were an option on the iPhone and iPad, because the way I work, I don't go into notification center really ever or very often. And those apps that I do have deliver quietly, sometimes I miss things because that's just not part of my habit of usage on my devices. And I think it would be nice to have an option for the phone to sort of give me some indication that, hey, there's something in notification center that, when you're ready, is there for you, but the watch has it.
Yeah, it's just a small red dot. I mean, that would be so easy to implement on the phone.
Oh yeah, it's very subtle, and I think it's really done well because it doesn't bother me if I see it, but it's just a reminder of, oh hey buddy, I got something for you. So I think that's a nice middle ground that they've done on the watch.
Or even like with the new iPhone 10 and later series where you've got these ears and they have like bits of data up there. There's no reason you couldn't put a dot next to the time or something like that. I think it would be very useful. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, it seems like something they could definitely do. One thing that is really different, because the watch is a child device to the phone, if you will. You know, currently the watch is not fully independent. It means that you can inherit a lot of your settings from the watch. And so in the watch app on the phone, where you manage so much of this, there's an option to say, hey, just mirror what my phone does. Just, I don't want any differences. I don't want to customize it. I like the way my phone is set up. The watch should just do what the phone does. And that can be helpful if you've done the weeding in the garden we just spoke about. But if you haven't, and everything is just like a floodgate on your phone, then the floodgate will come, will break on the watch as well. And I don't know about you, David, but I find notifications on the watch way more interruptive than on the phone, because they tap me, right? And so
they physically tap your body.
Yeah, I want them to be more controlled. I want them to be more exactly what I want. And so that means that, for me, I've gone through the watch app and said, hey, I know that I get notifications for, deliveries on my phone, but I don't want that on my watch, because I don't really need that on my wrist. And for me, the watch and the phone have really sort of diverged over time in how the notifications are handled.
Well, absolutely. I think that I understand why they have that mirror button, because it's very easy to say, okay, just do what you do on my phone, on my wrist. But I think that is a sucker's game. If you're going to use the watch, spend the time. You should prune the weeds on your phone, but you should even further prune the weeds on your watch, because, like you said, it's physically tapping your body. They've got a system in there where you can not only just say mirror everything on my phone, you can also do it on a per app basis. So you can go through and you can say, well, like Alaska Airlines, leave that on. I want to get a notification if I'm in an airport on my wrist. But the App Store, maybe I have the App Store turned on, so it's telling me when I get updates to my apps. I don't need my wrist to tell me that. So, So I would look at that as a second layer of defense, and make the taps on your wrist even more important, because just think about the context of it. I mean, you're sitting talking to a friend or a colleague at work, and your wrist taps. Now, are you going to check your watch in front of that person and make them feel like they're not that important to you? You certainly don't want to do it for the hot dog contest. I'm not going to let that go, by the way. I can't. I thought about it.
We're committed now, buddy.
Okay. But you will do it to hear that there's been an injury in the family or something, like whatever. I talked about the earthquake app last week. You will do it to find out the big ones on the way, right? But so, that's why the watch stuff is even more important, that you go in there and do that. And just to be clear, that is in the watch settings app. It's not in the notifications settings on the general settings app on your phone. It's got its own tab in the watch settings app, and you just go through that. It's not that hard, really. You can do it in a few minutes, but take the time to turn off all those notifications that don't matter to you.
Yeah, I mean, scrolling through mine, most of them are off, actually. And there are a few that, I want things like, messages to come to the watch, because the watch is really good at some of those quick interactions, but I don't need, my Eero network necessarily to tell me that there's a problem on my watch. I'm going to notice that sooner rather than later. So that is a great way to separate these things. And I think our joint encouragement to you listeners is to go through there and to really pare down what's on the watch, because it is very personal. And even though the Apple Watch has been around now for, several years, there's still, in a lot of circles, a real stigma with looking at your wrist, right? And if you glance at your wrist and it's a notification that, something silly happened, and then you're kind of called out in a meeting for being a jerk, like, that's not a good look. You don't want to have to deal with that. And so it can really be a thing where it can make you a better sort of meeting attendee, or make you more aware of what's going on around you if the watch is more deliberate in what you let come through. So for me, when I feel that tap on my wrist, I know that it's something that I have elected to see and that it's probably important to me. And very rarely is there something that gets through that is just not important because I've taken the time to really narrow that down. Last year when I sort of stepped away from the Apple Watch for a while, this was really at the heart of it. And when I bought the Series 5, one of the first things I did was I went through the screen and really made some tough decisions about what gets to notify me. And it has totally changed my relationship with the Apple Watch for the better.
So how often now are you wearing the watch now?
Almost every day. It is not every single day, but especially on the weekends, if I'm not going to be working out, I won't necessarily wear it. But almost every day it's been back on my wrist since the Series 5. A lot of that was the always on display, but a lot of it too was me going through this process that we're talking about today.
Yeah, I recently spent time with Mike Hurley, and he's got his fancy watches. And I tell you, I have no desire at all to go down that rabbit hole because I just love the Apple Watch so much. But so much of it is, setting it up the way you want it to work for you. And it's really an assistant for me. I mean, like I was talking earlier about those meeting notifications and getting ready and preparing and being on calls or getting to a location on time. And it's because my wrist taps me to tell me to do this stuff. And it is great. It's like having an assistant around if you set it up right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
But, it can't be useless. Now, on the watch, one of the things I would warn you is that Apple's built-in apps do require granular management, just like the old bad days on the iPhone. Like the News app is a great example. That's where you're going to get the stupid hot dog thing, right? So I just went in, but you have to tap several buttons. But I just have Apple News notifications turned off. I mean, I don't.
Oh, yeah.
If something really big happens, I'm not going to know immediately from my wrist, and that's okay. And it'll get to me eventually. But all the general built-in apps for Apple, they're a little deceiving because they're listed in the notification screen, but you've got to go through and manually adjust them. And that is a separate project that you're going to need to sit down and do. Pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea or your beverage of choice and just tap through those.
Yeah, and some of them are more complicated than it would seem. So like the podcast app, you have notifications, but then you can also set like the listen now time or like various things. And so some of these, even though it's in the notifications section in the watch app, these settings do a lot more than that. And so I find the sort of a sidebar, I find the watch app actually kind of confusing in places. Like I think it has sort of grown beyond what they initially had in mind for it. And I think it could use some pruning.
I think it was never really that great of an app for what it does. Like it's never really had a unified kind of like theory behind the interface, and stuff just ends up in places. Okay, totally unrelated, but I'm looking at it. Do you ever use the walkie-talkie app on the watch?
No, it's completely off.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that does.
I think Casey List uses it to like, well, maybe at least when their kids were younger, like having a baby in one hand, you can like quickly talk to your spouse, like, "Hey, I need a diaper" or something. But I don't know if he's still doing that. But it is not something that I've ever turned on. Even like, there's no interest in it.
Yeah, I had this idea when I started, like maybe that's something my wife and I can use. No, it's not. It really isn't. I mean, and with text messages and phones, there's just not that much of a need for it. I think if you're a big walkie-talkie user, please let us know in the forums. I would love to hear somebody is actually using this feature.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know. There's also a privacy angle with the Apple Watch. I mean, and this is true for the iPhone as well. On these devices, you can set notifications to be in different states if you're paying attention to the device or not. So on the iPhone, it would just say, new message. And then once you authenticate it with Touch or Face ID, it would show you the contents of the iMessage. With the watch, you have some options around that as well. So you can have just a sort of generic notifications until you raise your wrist and then you see the full details. So if that's something that you are concerned about, you do have options around that. So you're still notified, but someone else just glancing at your device, if it's out on a table or it's on your wrist, they can't see the contents of those notifications. I don't really worry about this because most of the time I just work at home. And so it isn't a big deal for me. But for a lot of people, this could be a serious consideration if they're in certain work environments or something like that. So you do have options and control around how easily viewable the contents of a notification are.
Agreed. So what makes the cut for you, Stephen, on the watch?
Yeah. So, I mean, looking through this list, I have a couple of watch specific ones. So like breathe, I have remind me twice a day to like take a moment and do some deep breathing. I have the noise app enabled. That's a Series 5 thing. So it will tell you if the sound levels in your environment are too loud. I have it set for the lowest at 80 decibels. It'll go up through 100. I have a little hearing loss as it is in my right ear, and I am very conscious about not doing damage to my hearing. And so, like that party, my wife and I were this weekend, my watch went off a couple of times. Like, there are a lot of people in this house, right? And it wasn't like a rave with a bunch of music or just people talking. But that's something that I want on. I was really excited when they added that to the Series 5. Past that, though, it's the messaging apps I mentioned earlier. You mentioned the travel apps. That's huge, especially on the watch. You're running through an airport and your gate changes. Like, I want to know about that as soon as possible. So that's allowed through. But a lot of other apps, things like deliveries or Dropbox or, notes. If someone joins a shared note and invites me, I don't need that sort of stuff on my watch. And so I have a lot of those things turned off.
Yeah, for me, it's mainly the communications stuff that gets through, and calendar. Interestingly, for me, although I'm a Fantastical fan, I actually get calendar notifications on the calendar app on the watch. I find it's more timely.
It is, yeah.
I think Apple's kind of tying a hand behind the back for these third-party calendar developers on the watch. I don't know what the whole story is on that, and I know they're coming out with a new version of Fantastical, so maybe that'll be better. But generally, calendar notifications, I use the calendar app on the watch and Fantastical for everything else.
Yeah, the first-party apps still seem to have some sort of more direct access, I guess, to the watch. But
I was thinking maybe they just are allowed to stay in memory longer or something. I'm not really sure what it is, but yeah.
So yeah, that's the Apple Watch, and I think you and I are both in a pretty good place with where we have ours set up. And I don't know, how much more I would want out of the watch. Like the Apple Watch does so much. Like I don't read email on my watch. I don't get links on my watch. Like so, I use a pared down set of its functionality, anyways. But overall, while the app to manage it is a little clunky, I feel like I'm relatively happy with what I can and can't do with the Apple Watch. I'm not one to like juggle do not disturb on the watch, but leave it off on the phone, like all that sort of stuff. So I don't run into some of those limitations. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how I have mine set up.
Yeah, power tip for Apple Watch that, this is, I guess, obvious in hindsight, but something I've been using increasingly is I got very deliberate, and you can manage this in that watch settings app. I got very deliberate about the Apple Watch apps on the dock. I'm holding up air quotes. I think they call it the dock, and that's the big button, not the dial. So a lot of times with my eyesight, I have trouble reading very small print on the watch face, which are complications. But now, if I just tap that button, I get to the dock, and it's got some of the apps in there that would normally be a complication, and you can set them to be there permanently. So it's a great alternative if you want. I don't know. Maybe this is the old man corner of the Mac Power users this week. Do you ever use the dock?
I do. I have just a couple of things in there now playing messages, phone, overcast, music, and carrot weather. So not a whole lot there. Again, I don't have very many apps installed in my watch. So if I need something else, it's not a big deal for me to go to the home screen and find it. But I do have the home screen set up to the list view, because the grid view I just find really difficult to manage. And so if you long press or deep press or whatever it's called on the watch on the grid of icons, you can set just be a list, and then you can just use the digital crown to scroll through it. And I find that much faster and nicer to get to what I want.
Yeah, I've done the same thing, but I have gone all in. I've got in the dock, I've got calendar, now playing, activity, scrolling down, OmniFocus, music, timers, carrot weather, messages. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff in there. And you can, like I said, you can set those and it makes the watch much more accessible, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot faster to get into that. So
yeah. And I agree with you. That grid, that honeycomb view for the icons is terrible. I mean, it's like hard to hit the tap targets. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that looks great, but doesn't work well.
Totally agreed. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. We've been talking a lot about apps and notifications today, and chances are each of those apps that we've mentioned, a lot of them need their own accounts, right? You got to log in with Twitter to the Twitter app. You got to log in with different credentials for your banking app, different credentials for, company email, and you want all of those credentials to be different. If you're using that same old password a bunch of different places, it really leaves you vulnerable. And in the past, that was a giant pain to do, right? Maybe you had a bunch of sticky notes with passwords on it. There's a much better way, and that is 1Password, because it lives on all of your devices, iOS, iPadOS, Mac, Windows, wherever you are, you can have your passwords with you. AgileBits works really hard to make sure they are using and supporting all of the latest greatest technology. So I can unlock my passwords with Face ID on my iPhone 11 Pro. If I'm on my MacBook Pro, I can do it with Touch ID there. They're always ready to go with new features, and that's something I really appreciate because security shouldn't slow you down. 1Password is great at work as well. We use it at Relay, so Mike and I have shared passwords. We have passwords that we share with our sales manager and our assistant. But it is really awesome if you're in a business to manage all that centrally. And 1Password Business has some really great reporting tools. You can go in and you can see what users aren't using 1Password. Maybe they haven't installed the apps or they haven't logged in. You can see who uses shared information. You can manage all that stuff centrally. So if someone comes or goes from your organization over time, you can make sure that they have access to what they need, and more importantly, don't have access to what they don't. Head on over to 1password.com/MPU to learn more, and you can sign up for a free 30-day trial. When you sign up, you'll get 20% off. Once again, that's 1password.com/MPU.
Okay, let's talk about the Mac. As we were heading into the show, I was like, oh, I am in great shape with notifications. I can tell everybody how smart I am. And then I looked at my settings for my Mac and realized I have broken all of the rules on the Mac.
I feel the same way. I have a lot of apps sending me notifications on the Mac. For the most part, the management of this mirrors iOS. Like they basically picked up the iOS system and bolted it onto Mac OS. And
I'm not a huge fan of that either. I feel like, why did they do that?
That system preference pane is real clunky. But
and it's definitely made for touch, and the Mac is not a touch device.
And it calls things like the login window the lock screen. So there's a setting, say, hey, show this notification on what this calls the lock screen. That's not called lock screen anywhere else in macOS. That's a login window. And so if you say, for me, if I wake up my MacBook Pro, like I'm using it today, right? And I have a couple of apps send me notifications to that. So if my computer is locked, I can see, oh, I have a meeting in 10 minutes I need to be aware of. But I don't have iMessage go there. But yeah, there's some weirdness to how they did this. But if you understand the management of this on your iPad or iPhone, generally the Mac works the same way.
Yeah, and the ways to get to this settings is you can go to the settings preference pane and then go to notifications, or you can swipe over. If you have a trackpad, or I don't know how you do this with a mouse, but with a trackpad, you swipe over with two fingers from the edge of the screen, the right edge of the screen in. It brings the notification center in. Scroll down to the bottom, there's a little gear there, and that gets you to these notifications. That's actually where I generally manage them, is when I see them show up, just like on the phone.
Right. And it is a little more the Wild West, though, because not all apps use this, right? Like I've definitely come across apps, a few less and less now, but back when this first launched on the Mac, developers have kind of built their own over time, but generally apps have played nice with the system for a long time, but you still come across it every once in a while. And there are some Mac specific things that are clever. So like if you put your Mac in Do Not Disturb, like mine is right now, none of this happens. But say that you plug into a projector, well, the Mac knows that, so it automatically puts your Mac into Do Not Disturb. So you're not getting, messages from your wife on the big screen in the conference room, which would probably be good. So
that has happened to me.
Oh yeah. And again, this is like a thing that should work, but doesn't always work. So
yeah, well, it's in the old days before they had figured it out. But it was
but
not good.
You can use that there. But you said that you felt like you broke a bunch of rules. So like, what's going on your iMac over there?
I just, I have not been, number one, paying that close of attention to notifications on the Mac. Like I rage quit Apple News a long time ago for hot dog related problems. But when I slide in, I've got like all these notifications, and like every time I run a Hazel rule, it gives me a notification, and I run a lot of Hazel rules. Every time something gets touched in Dropbox, and I just looked in there, and it was this massive pile of garbage in my notification center on my Mac, and it was because I wasn't really using the feature enough. I wasn't paying attention to it, and my garden is overgrown with weeds. So as we've been prepping the show over the last couple of weeks, I've been really taking the time to clear out. And in fact, notifications were so bad on my Mac that I just stopped using them. I did the thing that I'm complaining about. And now that I'm starting to kind of, wrestle this thing, I'm starting to use them more, because now all of a sudden when I check notifications, it actually gives me useful information instead of the fact that I just moved 18 files with Hazel.
Yeah, I have the Hazel ones turned off. Like if there's a problem, I'll go find it. For the most part, mine mirror the iPhone. So like the core apps are the same. I do have all mail messages send me banners, and that maybe sounds a little bananas to some people, but
yeah, it does. That is crazy. I saw that. I put a note. What are you doing, Steven? Yeah. I don't get it.
I don't get as much email as people may think I do. And when I do, especially for work, it's something I want to look at. I could probably get rid of that and just use the badge, but it's stuck around. Skype is one that I don't have notify me anywhere else, but it notifies me on the Mac. And then I do use Carbon Copy Cloner. I haven't talked about this because we haven't revisited the Mac Pro, but I've been doing nightly backups to some new internal drives I put in it, and Carbon Copy, it just lets me know that was successful overnight, because that is something I want to know if it failed for some reason.
Yeah.
And then, things like Transmit, apps that aren't on iOS, Transmit used to be on the iPad. It still works, but it's basically gone. Things like that are Mac only or really specific to my Mac workflow. Those I allow to send me notifications. But so I feel like I'm in okay shape, but there's always room for improvement.
Oh man, I was just a mess, and I'm still kind of a mess as I look through it. One of my big challenges is, so I work in like a corner of the house. I built this little studio, and it's isolated, hopefully, so the sound is better on podcasts. But people come and go from the house as I'm here, and I like to know when people come and go. Just a good idea, I feel like. But so I have a notification based on the Home app, and we installed one of those locks, that I can open remotely. Mm-hmm. And I have the notification on it every time the lock gets thrown, give me a notification. And it's like, in fact, we shared with each other our statistics as we were prepping the show. And one of my biggest violators is the Home app, because every time I go, like I take a break and go check the mailbox, or if somebody comes home, not only do I get a notification when the door opens, I get a notification when the lock gets unlocked, when the door gets opened, the door gets closed, and when the lock gets relocked, because we generally keep our front door locked. So it's like 4 notifications for every ingress and egress. And that is something that I was hoping to have solved by now, but I don't. But I have to go in and figure out a way to turn that down to just 1 notification every time the door opens. If I have to, I may even just put one of those Bluetooth magnetic switches on the door, rather than use the lock as the notification trigger, because it bothers me that much. So I'm getting problems like that still, but I have made a lot of progress on my Mac. I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
Well, yeah, I mean the inclusion of like even the Home app on the Mac, right? That changes the game if you want to know when your garage door goes up, and you want that, like it is
Yeah.
not getting any simpler. And I, for one, don't find Notification Center on the Mac to be all that useful. Like looking at on my laptop, I've never cleared this out. Like there's like it goes way back in time. I don't really use the widgets, especially since the Find My app doesn't include a widget. I'm not in there very often, so I generally don't use that slide out panel just on the Mac very often. So for me, it's all about the banners and badges, honestly.
Yeah, and that's one of the granular things you can do with the Mac apps. A good example for me, I have an app on my Mac that I got in the App Store for like $2. It's called How Long Left. And if you listen to me on the Focus podcast, I'm anal retentive and I block time for work. Like I'll say, work on the Mac Power Users Outline, and I'll have an hour scheduled on my calendar. But what How Long Left does is it's just a menu bar app that tells you what your current calendar event is and how long is left on it. And it's just a really simple tool, but I like having it up in my menu bar. So as I'm working through the day, I'm like, okay, I'm working on the MPU outline. I got 30 minutes left to work on this before I get on to the next thing I've tasked myself to do, But it was throwing all this stuff in my notification center for every calendar event. And for me, that's a lot of calendar events. That was silly. And I would never refer to it. I would never want to look at it in notification center. So you just throw one switch in the setting to say, okay, put this on the banner so I can see it when the event comes, or don't. Just leave it in the menu bar, but definitely do not put it in my notification center. And then that got rid of hundreds of notification center entries.
Yeah, that's a good move.
Yeah. I mean, it's none of this stuff is hard. And when we first started talking about the show, I'm like, is there a show on this? Well, I think there is, because it's so important. But, the running theme here, guys, is you just spend some time on this stuff, because if you have a working notification system, it really makes a difference in how you use your technology, and it makes your life better. But for almost everybody, the system is unusable because there's way too much there's way too much noise over signal. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Make your next move with Squarespace and enter offer code MPU at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace lets you easily create a website for your next idea with a unique domain, award-winning templates, and more, and it just works. Just this last week, I signed up another friend from Squarespace. It has saved me so much trouble, Stephen, as I've been using Squarespace over the years, because all these people in my life know I'm a nerd. They come to me for help with a website, or they show me that they're going to spend $10,000 on some web developer, and I say, well, let's try a $15 Squarespace account first, and every time it works. So maybe you want to make an online store. They've got commerce. Maybe you want to make a portfolio. They've got great image support. Maybe you want to create the next blog. I've got MacSparky on Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that lets you do that. There's nothing to install, no patches to worry about, or no upgrades needed. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Squarespace has got it covered. They've got award-winning 24/7 customer support if you need any help, and they let you quickly and easily grab a unique domain name. And all those award-winning templates are beautifully designed for you to show off your great ideas. One of the things I really like about Squarespace is the templates look different. It doesn't have like a kind of branding around the templates where you look at it and you're like, oh, that's a Squarespace site. No, you can customize it to make it look however you want. Now, I'm not a designer. I really probably shouldn't be doing this, but I'm always in there tweaking my template in MacSparky and also on my legal site to make it just look a little better or the way I want it, changing fonts, defining the margins, and all this stuff is drag and drop. It's just so easy to do. I don't have to hire somebody, and I love that. And the plans start at just $12 a month. But you can start a trial with no credit card required by going to squarespace.com/MPU. When you decide to sign up, use the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain, and to show your support for the Mac Power Users. You're listening to this show. You're probably a nerd. Your friends are going to ask you to build a website. Help them make it with Squarespace and look like a hero like me. Once again, that's squarespace.com/MPU and the code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase. Thank you, Squarespace, for your support of the Mac Power Users and all over Relay FM. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website. Okay, so we've been talking about notifications. I thought it'd be fun towards the end here to talk about what we would do if we were in charge at Apple to make them better.
I think a theme that we've talked about all the way through is just more granularity.
Yep.
And I think you could look at apps like Messages and Mail, who they give you those sort of in-app settings. Hey, I want this thread, but not that thread. I'd like to see that sort of thing not only more available in Apple's own apps, but Apple to really set an example of, hey, third-party developers, here are ways you can do this. Here are examples of things you can do when you decide to get granular with the types of information that can fire a notification.
Yeah, even like I would want to get multiple vectors. Like, what about VIP email between certain hours? Like add additional layers to this so we can be even more deliberate about what is allowed to tap us on the shoulder.
Yeah, I think it'd be neat too, and this would be difficult, I think, but to make VIP a wider standard. So, yeah, if I mark you as a VIP in Mail, then you also are a VIP in Messages, and maybe you're a VIP in Twitter direct mentions and these various ways you could contact me. That would be really interesting because it would involve a lot of third-party apps. But even if Apple could just do it across its apps, I would think it could be useful to some people. I also consider, I don't have a name for this, the anti-VIP. So if I have notifications on for everything in Messages, but if that one person messages me, don't notify me. And yeah, you can do that with Do Not Disturb, but again, like, that could be more flexible. It could be more powerful. So, if someone's on the naughty list, we'll call it the naughty list, they would have sort of a subset of availability to you as well.
Yeah, I was thinking in honor of Steve Jobs, we call it the bozo button.
There you go. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Something that I would really want to see is better device awareness. We talked about how the iPhone and Apple Watch sort of hand off responsibility for notifications. But if I'm at my Mac and it's clear that I'm working, I really don't want my phone or watch to go off about anything, unless it's something that's specific to the watch. Like I just don't want the breathe reminders or whatever. But there are times where I'm on my Mac and Slack goes off on my phone. It's like, well, it's just in the background, Mac OS. Like, calm down. I'm still here. And some sort of sense that iCloud would know the state that I'm in, the device, the device that's in front of me, the device that I'm using, that would go a long way, I think, in easing my frustration with, yes, I'm aware of this. I don't need all my devices to go off. That would go a long way for me. And again, they're doing it in some areas. It's not very consistent. It doesn't really include other devices, it seems like. I would want that to be a lot smarter.
Yeah, like right now, I just fixed this week a problem where anytime I got a phone call, it sounded like, aliens were invading because my Mac went off, my iPad went off, my phone went off. And then because they couldn't keep up with each other, I'd answer the phone call and the client would still hear the phone ringing on the Mac. I mean, it's just madness. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, it should say, okay, he's got this device near him or he's working on this, particularly when you're using a device. I mean, you're using your phone and yet the iPad starts ringing. I mean, come on. Don't you know I'm on this thing?
Bingo.
Anyway, yeah, I agree with all of that. Granularity on granularity. And I know that will make the user interface more difficult. Maybe that's the reason why they're not doing it that much. It seems like the way they're approaching this is adding the second level granularity in the applications themselves. And I would like to see them continue that trend. I would like to see third-party developers as well do that. I mean, they have the ability, third-party developers have the ability to control what gets the notification trigger. You see it with some of the news apps where they let you filter it. Steven was talking earlier about some of the sports apps. I think developers that are listening to this, the more you can give us the ability to customize exactly what gets the right of tapping us on the shoulder, the more likely we are to keep it turned on. One thing I put in here as well, I'm not sure we're on I was talking about developer feedback. And I feel like developers should know that like a certain type of notification ends up getting their app notifications turned off. Like they should get some kind of statistics about that. I'd like them to get both negative and positive reinforcement from users to see, if you decide to turn it into a notification fest, basically it's just going to result in nobody using your notifications.
I think that would be excellent because right now there's no really repercussions, right? I mean,
yeah,
your notifications get turned off, so maybe you don't know about what's going on in the app, but data would be good for developers to have. And you can always provide that feedback yourself, but if it was some sort of metric they could see in iTunes Connect, that would be, I think, more useful because it would just involve everybody. The other thing I thought about was the role of Do Not Disturb in this, because while Apple has been providing better notification support and options, Do Not Disturb has also gotten better. You can set it for a time. Siri sometimes will suggest, oh, you're in a meeting. Do you want this on until you leave the meeting? That never works for me, but maybe it's because all my events are at home, so it doesn't count them the same. But Do Not Disturb is like, that's one way to solve this, but it's a really broad tool. And to really make this better, they've got to work on the notification side of it too. But like, don't overlook Do Not Disturb in this conversation because it is powerful. You can long press on your iPhone on the Do Not Disturb item in the control center, and there's a bunch of options there. So explore that as well. So maybe if notifications are really bothering you during a certain time of day or a certain situation, Do Not Disturb can be a temporary fix as well.
Yeah, agreed. And I put a thread about this show in the Mac Power Users forums as we let up, and this has been a very active thread as I'm looking at it now. There's many views and posts. So we'll put a link to it in the show notes. You can go through and read through some of the listeners' tips. A lot of them echo the stuff we talked about today, paring things down, getting rid of the stuff that's not useful. There were some shout outs to Pushcut. Pushcut is a cool app on iOS that allows you to do some interesting things with notifications and automation tools. Rosemary and I there's a whole episode of that on the Automators podcast. I'll put a link to that. And, but it seems like everybody here has the same thing. Process it down to the minimal number of notifications so you can make it work for you.
Totally.
So as I said at the beginning of the show, I feel like notifications are something that can have a happy ending. When I was talking earlier about that developer feedback, the idea of letting them know that a bunch of people unsubscribed your notifications when you started sending garbage out, I think the downside of that is not many people would actually do that. I think most people just let notification turn into this dumpster fire on their device where it doesn't serve them and just gets in the way and ultimately doesn't help them. It doesn't give them the notifications they need. So this is a problem that properly wrangled, you can make notifications your friend again. So you have homework on this episode of the Old Mac Power Users. Between now and next week, why don't you take a minute, go through and pare down your notifications to just those that work for you. And it's something magical because suddenly it's like your phone got a new feature. It's like, oh, this is really useful now, and I really like having notifications. So rather than being something that just make you aggravated, they're something that actually make your life better.
Well, yeah, and it can mean that when your phone does make a noise or your watch does tap you, that it's worth pulling away from real life to see because it's something that you have a past version of you has decided is worthy of your interruption. And
yeah,
the reality is most of this stuff just isn't, right? And we live in this world where I feel where I feel like I'm getting pulled in a bunch of different directions, and sometimes the best option is just to put everything in Do Not Disturb for a little while. But
yeah,
there should be middle ground there where you don't have to go that severe to feel like you're in control.
Yeah. What if you could rely on notifications that were truly of interest? What if you knew that when your watch tapped you or your phone buzzed, it was going to give you something that was going to be useful to you? I mean, wouldn't that be nice?
It would.
The dream is real. You can do it. Just go and set it up. We talked through the tools here. There's going to be a forum post on this. I'm sure there'll be listeners also sounding off there. If you have any questions, that'd be a great place to ask them. We're doing a series over on the Focus podcast about overload, and the very first episode is called Information Overload. Focus 91. We'll put a link for that in the show notes if you're interested in kind of the bigger elements, kind of beyond tech of this problem. That'd be something worth listening to. But go fix your notifications, gang. Not that hard.
It takes a little time.
Yeah, my Mac is still a work in progress, but I'm feeling real good about my iPhone and iPad and watch. We didn't really talk about the iPad, but to me, the iPad is an even more narrow set of notifications. Almost nothing gets through there because I try to work on that kind of as a safe space with no bothers.
Yeah, mine is basically a mirror of my iPhone, more or less.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are the Mac Power Users. This was our notification show. You can find us over on relay.fm/MPU. You can find the forums at talk.macpowerusers.com. Steven's over at 512 Pixels. What's going on at 512 Pixels, Steven? Anything exciting?
Well, last week was the 10th anniversary of the iPad. So I did this video where I rewatched the keynote and did like a commentary track over it, like a weird experiment. And people seem to like it, so maybe I'll do more of it. But that was a fun project recently.
Yeah, I've got a new thing I'm doing that is going to come out either right before the show posts or right after. The Fantastic Hal version 3 is coming out. They asked me to make screencasts for their product. Turned out to be like 2 hours of video.
Wow.
It was turned into a lot. It's over 30. I don't know what the final count is now, but they were nice enough to say, yeah, you can go ahead and release that as a free field guide too. So there's a new free field guide, and I'll have it on MacSparky, and I'll send it out to the newsletter subscribers where you can get a lot of information about how to use that Fantastic Calendar app. And there's a bunch of general advice about using calendars sprinkled throughout those videos. So there's something you can go get. Doesn't cost you anything. All right. Once again, we're the Mac Power Users, relay.fm/MPU. Thank you to our sponsors, Boll & Branch, Smile, 1Password, and Squarespace. And we'll see you next week.